Tree deities. A tree deity or tree spirit is a nature deity related to a tree. Such deities are present in many cultures. They are usually represented as a young woman, often connected to ancient fertility and tree worship lore. The status of tree deities varies from that of a local fairy, ghost, sprite, or nymph to that of a goddess. Examples of tree deities: the Yakshis or the Yakshinis, mythical maiden deities of Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain mythology, are closely associated with trees, especially the Ashoka tree and the Sal tree. Although these tree deities are usually benevolent, there are also Yakshinis with malevolent characteristics in Indian folklore. Panavariyaman, named after Panai, the Tamil name for the Palmyra palm, is an ancient fertility deity linked to this palm that is so important in Tamil culture. This deity is also known as Talavasini, a name that further relates her to all types of palm trees. Some other Tamil tree deities are related to ancient agriculture deities, such as Puliyadavayaman, the deity of the tamarind tree, and Kadamam Biriyaman, associated with the Kadamba tree. These were seen as manifestations of a goddess who offers her blessings by giving fruits in abundance. In Thailand, the village ghost or fairies related to trees such as Nang Takian and Nang Tani are known generically as Nang Mai. There are also other tree ghosts that are male. Tree deities were common in ancient northern European lore. In Charlemagne's time, following the Capitulatio de Partibus Saxonae in 782 offerings to sacred trees or any other form of worship of the spirits of trees and springs were outlawed. Even as late as 1227, the Synod of Trier decreed that the worship of trees and source was forbidden. So that is a touch into the mythology and lore behind tree deities. And there are many different ones. Looking into this and the Jinn theory with the connection of making different medicines and drinks from different trees and plants, calling them spirits, and having interactions with deities while in intoxicated states, led me to think that potentially they are imbibing the actual deity by partaking in the plant. This is a poem about the Jinns. It's called The Jinn, 1828. Town tower, shore deep, where lower, cliffs steep, waves gray, where play, winds gay, all sleep. Hark, a sound, far and slight, breathes around on the night, high and higher, nigh and nigher, like a fire, roaring bright. Now on, 'tis sweeping with rattling beat, like dwarf imp leaping in gallop fleet. He flies, he prances, in frolic fancies, on wave crest dances with pattering feet. Hark the rising swell with each new burst, like the tolling bell of a convent cursed, like the billowy roar on a stormy lashed shore, now hushed but once more, maddening to its worst. O God, the deadly sound of the Jinn's fearful cry, quick 'neath the spiral round of the deep staircase fly. See, see our lamplight fade, and of the balustrade mounts the circling shade up to the ceiling high. 'Tis the Jinn's wild streaming swarm, whistling in their tempest flight, snap the tall yews 'neath the storm, like a pine flame crackling bright. Swift though heavy, lo their crowd, through the heavens rushing loud, like a livid thunder cloud with its bolt of fiery might. Ho, they are on us, close without, shut tight the shelter where we lie, with hideous din the monster rout, dragon and vampire fill the sky. The loosened rafter overhead trembles and bends like quivering reed, shakes the old door with shuddering dread, as from its rusty hinge 'twould fly. wild cries of hell, voices that howl and shriek, the horrid troop before the tempest tossed, O heaven, descends my lowly roof to seek. Bends the strong wall beneath the furious host, totters the house as though, like dry leaf shorn, from autumn bow and on the mad blast borne, up from its deep foundations it were torn, to join the stormy whirl. Ah, all is lost. O prophet, if thy hand but now save from these hellish things, a pilgrim at thy shrine I'll bow, laden with pious offerings, bid their hot breath its fiery rain stream on the faithful's door in vain. Vainly upon my blackened pane grate the fierce claws of their dark wings. They have passed, and their wild legion ceased to thunder at my door, fleeting through night's rayless region. Hither they return no more. Clanking chains and sounds of woe fill the forests as they go, and the tall oaks cower low, bent their flaming light before. On the storm of wings bears far the fiery fear, till scarce the breeze now brings dim murmurings to the ear, like locust humming hail, or thrash of tiny flail, plied by the fitful gale on some old roof tree sear. Fainter now are born, feeble muttering still, as when Arab horn swells its magic peal. Shoreward o'er the deep, fairy voices sweep, and the infants sleep, golden visions fill. Each deadly Jinn, dark child of fright, of death and sin, speeds in wild flight. Hark the dull moan, like the deep tone of ocean's groan, afar by night. More and more fades it slow, as on shore ripples flow, as the plaint far and faint of a saint murmured low. Hark, hissed, around I list, the bounds of space, all trace, efface of sound. John O'Sullivan, Victor Marie Hugo. Very interesting poem on the Jinn. Now I'd like to take a look at occult world, early lore in the Jinn. A Jinn, genie, Jinn, Jan, Jinn, Shayatin, Shaitan is an Arabic lore, a type of interfering spirit, often demon-like but not equivalent to a demon. As of the Greek daemons, Jinn are self-propagating and can be either good or evil. They possess supernatural powers and can be conjured in magical rituals to perform various tasks and services. A Jinn appears as a wish-granting genie in many Arabic folk tales, such as those in the Book of 1001 Nights. In pre-Islamic lore, the Jinn are malicious, born of smokeless fire, and are not immortal. They live with other supernatural beings in the Kaf, a mythical range of emerald mountains that encircles the earth. They like to roam the deserts and wilderness. They are usually invisible, but have the power to shapeshift to any form, be it insect, other animal, or human. So this is suggesting that if we're working on a flat Earth cosmology, the mythical range of emerald mountains that encircle the Earth would be the southern outer ring, as opposed to the northern central mountain in which the Jinn live. They are in the outer lands, outer darkness. King Solomon used a magic ring to control Jinn and protect him from them. The ring was set with a gem, probably a diamond, that had a living force of its own. With the ring, Solomon branded the necks of the Jinn as his slaves. One story tells that a jealous Jinn, sometimes identified as Asmodeus, stole the ring while Solomon bathed in the river Jordan. The Jinn seated himself on Solomon's throne at his palace and reigned over his kingdom, forcing Solomon to become a wanderer. God compelled the Jinn to throw the ring into the sea. Solomon retrieved it and punished the Jinn by imprisoning him in a bottle. According to another story, Solomon took Jinn to his crystal-paved palace, where they sat at tables made of iron. The Quran tells how the king made them work at building palaces and making carpets, ponds, statues, and gardens. Whenever Solomon wanted to travel to faraway places, the Jinn carried them there on their backs. Solomon forced the Jinn to build the Temple of Jerusalem and all of the city as well. So this legend has merit in reality and also in mythology of what's happening in the body. King Solomon's temple, the temple made with no hands, has been said to be the human body made by God. And these demons could be considered the thoughts inside the mind and temptations in the outside world. And the ring worn by Solomon has the name of God on it, giving him the ability to control the demons to do his bidding. So that's the idea of using the name of God, such as chanting, which is right in the middle of the name, Om, Sala, Om, An. Using this is branding into the neck of these jinn demons to obey his will. In other words, conquering the mind. It could also have merit in reality in actual spirits that were used by some mythical king to build these faraway places. The jinn in Muslim lore. Islamic theology absorbed and modified the jinn. Some became beautiful and good-natured according to the Muslim faith. Humans are created from clay and water, and the essence of angel is light. Jinn were created on the day of creation from the smokeless fire or the essential fire. They are invisible to most people except under certain conditions. However, dogs and donkeys are able to see them. They were on the earth before humans, but it is unknown how long. By some accounts, they were created 2,000 years before Adam and Eve and are equal to angels in stature. Their ruler, Iblis, also called Shaitan, refused to worship Adam and so was cast out of heaven along with his followers. Iblis became the equivalent of the devil, and the followers all became demons. Iblis' throne is in the sea. As do humans, jinn have free will and are able to understand good and evil. The Quran states that the purpose of their creation is the same as that of humans, which is to worship God. They are responsible for their actions and will be judged at the last judgment. It is said that hell will be filled with jinn and humans together. Conflicting stories about the jinn abound, similar to conflicting stories about angels and demons. According to some accounts, there are 3 types of jinn. Those who are able to fly. These jinn can be heavy or light, tall or thin, and are shapeshifters with flexible bodies. Those who reside in a given area and cannot travel out of that area. They may live in abandoned houses. Those who manifest as snakes, scorpions, creeping animals, dogs, especially black dogs who are devils or iblis, and cats. A cat should not be chased away early in the morning or late at night, lest it be a shape-shifted jinn who will take revenge. Muhammad warned the people to cover their utensils, close their doors, and keep their children close to them at night, as the jinn spread out at night and take things. He also warned people to put out their lights, as the jinn could drag away the wicks and start a fire. However, they will not open a locked door, untie a knot, or uncover a vessel. If people find a snake in their house, they should call out to it for 3 days before killing it. If the snake is shape-shifted jinn, it will leave. The jinn can be converted, as Surah 72 of the Quran indicates. It has been revealed to me that a company of the jinn gave ear. Then they said, "We have indeed heard a Quran wonderful, guiding to rectitude." Muhammad converted jinn by reciting the Quran to them. However, all jinn are unreliable and deceitful, even if converted. The jinn will guard graves if commanded to do so by witchcraft. In Egypt, it is bad luck to open a pharaoh's tomb, for the guarding jinn will harm anyone who violates the sacred space. Jinn life. The lifespan of a jinn is much longer than that of humans, but they do die. They are both male and female and have children. They eat meat, bones, and dung of animals. They play, sleep, and have animals. Descriptions of their appearances vary. They may have the legs of a goat, black tail, hairy body. They may be exceptionally tall and have their eyes set vertically in their heads. Although they can live anywhere on the planet, they prefer deserts, ruins, and places of impurity like graveyards, garbage dumps, bathrooms, camel pastures, and hashish dens. They also can live in the houses where people live. They love to sit in places between the shade and the sunlight and move around when the dark first falls. They also like marketplaces, and Muslims are warned not to be the first to enter the market or the last to leave it. In Islam, it is believed that the humans are unable to get in touch with the deceased, learn about the future or what happens after death, or be healed. As these phenomena are in God's realm, Jinn have limited powers in these areas. Jinn can appear to humans as the spirits of the dead and communicate with the living through visions and voices. Those who learn the medicinal qualities of plants through the plants talking to them are actually speaking with devils. It was the Jinn who taught human sorcery. So that's a direct message from the Muslim sect on the Jinn, claiming that drinking, smoking, eating these different plants puts you into a different trance state where you are communicating directly with these Jinn. And again, not all Jinn are good, not all Jinn are bad. As with anything in life, nothing's all good, nothing's all bad. So maybe there is something powerful to be gained here. Just like Aladdin's lamp, he conjured a good genie, and at the end of the movie, there was an evil genie. So if the creator made these creatures, perhaps there's potential in using them for good or for evil. It's just as the Solomon legend, he used even the evil Jinn to build the Temple of Solomon. And I'm sure he used the good Jinn for other things. Jinn will eat human food, stealing its energy unless people say the name Allah prior to eating. Marriage between humans and Jinn, as do fairies, Jinn fall in love with humans and marry them. There is no direct evidence of it, and no children have qualities of both Jinn and human. A clan in the United Arab Emirates claimed to descend from a female Jinn. There is a controversy over whether it is lawful to marry Jinn, but most Islamic jurists believe it is unlawful. There also seems to be controversy as to whether a mixed marriage will be able to produce children. If the mother is human, the children will be visible and look like humans. If the mother is Jinn, the children will be invisible. Jinn interfere in human relationships. If they fall in love with a human, they try to disrupt marriages and other relationships. Possession by a Jinn. Ordinary human acts can kill or hurt Jinn without people being aware of doing so. When that happens, Jinn possess the offending people in order to take revenge on them. Others who are vulnerable to possession are those who live alone, for Jinn are opposed to community. As do the daemons, pairs of Jinn stay with each person. One whispers good, the other whispers evil. The moods of humans can be affected by the Jinn, ranging from happiness to sadness for no known reason. Although they are able to affect people's minds and bodies, they have no power over the soul or heart. When possessed, the person appears to be insane and exhibits signs of anger, anxiety, and depression. A woman's voice will sound like a man's, and a man's voice will sound like a woman's. Physical symptoms include nausea after eating, headaches, frequent desire to fight, heavy shoulders, a constant feeling of dissatisfaction, and a desire to commit suicide. Asking the Jinn to leave may not be enough to induce him or her to go, and someone who is trained may be needed to perform an exorcism to expel the Jinn from your body. Modern experiences of the Jinn. Jinn are still prominent in modern superstitions, and encounters with them occur all the time. They are visible in great numbers to those who can see them in the Middle East. Beliefs about Jinn are strong in certain areas. Upper middle class people in urban areas tend to look upon Jinn beliefs as superstition, but in rural and remote areas, the Jinns hold sway. David Morehouse, a retired remote viewer for the U.S. military, relates in his book Psychic Warrior how he had temporary visions of Jinn due to a head injury. He was among American troops camped with Jordanian troops for training exercise in Jordan at Batin el Ghul, which means belly of the beast. The Jordanians considered it a haunted valley where the demons came out at night to murder people. It was not unusual to have one's sleep interrupted by the screams and howls of frightened Jordanian soldiers who swore in the light of day that they had seen a demon. Batin el Ghul was a desolate and jagged valley carved out of the desert that spilled over from Saudi Arabia. There was no life there except arachnids. Morehouse was accidentally shot in the helmet, an injury that left a huge lump on his head. After this, he experienced the Jinn. Sometime in the night, my eyes opened to a surreal light outside the tent. It was like the light of an eclipsed sun, and it wasn't coming from any stove. It filled the night sky. The entire Batinelle Ghoul and the hills beyond were bathed in the strange bluish-gray light. I walked to the edge of the bluff and stared into the valley. Dark figures moved effortlessly across its floor like apparitions. They poured from the rocks in various heaps and shapes and moved about the clusters of tents. I could hear muffled cries from the Jordanian encampment, and momentarily I thought we were being overrun by thieves or Israelis. Panic, I turned to run for help. Colliding with one of the figures, I reflexively closed my eyes, except I didn't collide. I walked right through it. Turning around, I watched the figure disappear over the edge of the bluff. After that, the lump on his head disappeared. This is very similar to addicts of methamphetamines who claim that they see shadow people and tall, dark figures that move through walls and follow people around or move in groups and live in empty places, valleys where no one goes into. Let's take a look at some images of the Jinn. One second. Pull up a picture of Jinn. So this is an image of a tall black Jinn, 5 fingers, who's communicating with some kinds of creatures. I don't know if these are also Jinn. This one has a snake around his neck with pink wings. Terrifying images. This is a picture of a Jinn coming down on a man while he's sleeping. 2 Jinn looking out from around him. Here's a Jinn. It looks like a female Jinn, has breasts. She's holding a cow by the tail and a man. Looks like he's stealing them, walking off. This is 15th century ink wash in gold. Here is a demon, white-skinned. Looks like he has had a leg chopped off, which is replaced by a snake. What in the world? And he is fighting some kind of a warrior. Persian epic of Shahnameh Dives Seped, Persian for demons, the chieftain of the Divs. This guy is terrifying looking. He's got fangs, earrings. Look at him. He's got the bracelets on his wrist, and it looks like this warrior here has broke whatever vessel was on his waist. So this looks like a piece of this. I could be wrong, but looks like he has broke this, which may have led to his leg breaking off here. That is freaky. Here's a Jinn licking the feet of people sleeping. This is a classic archetype. I don't know if there's energy or something coming out, but different people in India bow to the feet and touch the feet of a master because they want to have the energy from him. So maybe that's what this guy's doing. His tail is like a separate creature. Look at that. It's got an eye and a mouth. That is as freaky as it gets. It's the Jinn riding on the back of some kind of animal, using a snake as a leash around the neck. And he's also eating a snake. Massive nose and red robes. And he's with another smaller guy who looks like he might be giving him this. And here you got these flowers in the back, which these flowers might be some kind of plants used. Maybe these guys reside inside of these plants, and you can make some kind of medicine or something and interact with them. Okay, here you got this is from 1001 Nights. This is a big Jinn here. And this looks highly symbolic. He's holding a sword, sitting Indian style with two elephants. Looks like dolphins, dogs, a cat above his head, and two Persian kings. And these deities are holding the face of these dogs with swords. And this guy looks terrified, in my opinion. That is a strange picture. This is almost like a totem pole. Maybe these animals specifically can see them, or they have some kind of ties to that animal. This one's hard to see. It's another gigantic Jinn in all black. I guess this is Iblis. And smaller guys look like they're coming to answer to him. You got another Jinn who's riding on the back of a lion, all pink, and he has severed the head of someone. And these other Jinn are following behind him. They look much smaller. Look at this Jinn at the top left, has a goat's leg in his hand. And they all have serpent tongues emitting out of their mouth, or maybe they're flames. You got another three Jinn sitting and talking to each other. I mean, these could be good. They could be evil Jinn. They might just be hanging out talking. It looks like these guys have been burned. You see the smoke on them, like they have ash. And it looks like this guy is scared, and these two are talking to him. Horns coming out of their heads. And I mean, it seems like there's a hierarchy where they meet with the biggest ones. This bird type thing has a snake around his neck. It looks like he's offering it to the biggest one. And, perhaps these guys can transform into these snakes. Like the legend said just a minute ago, some of them can transform into animals. And there's thousands of these pictures in here. You could go through these images forever. And look at this guy. He almost looks like an ogre. Green skin, with all of these scabs all over. He's got bells around him, chains on, huge horns, and angel wings. And these guys look like they're coming. Either they disturbed him or they came out looking for him, right? The Raksha, terrifying bloodlusting demon from Indian mythology, ravenous hunger for human blood. So that's vampires, right? So these guys with the fangs, they can transform, make themselves look different, breaking into houses, sucking blood. crazy. Incredible. I'd like to do more of these videos in the future, taking a look at more and more of these devils and Jinn. Break down and see what are the connections between all these characters, you know? These are demons in biblical art. And these guys are very similar to the way they look. This is Nimrod when he was turned into a beast for 7 years, I believe. This is the Freemasonic Jabulon. Frog head, some kind of king's head, and then a cat, and a spider body, which this represents the triune deity, reptilian, animal, and human. But I think there is definite connections between the Jinn and the demon characters that we see around the world. And another chapter from the demons and Jinn living inside of plants is the fairies, or the fae. The fairy is a mythical being or legendary creature found in the folklore of multiple European cultures. A form of spirit often described as metaphysical. Myths and stories about fairies do not have a single origin, but they are a collection of pagan belief systems, spirits of the dead, prehistoric precursors to humans, and spirits of nature. The label of fairy is at times applied only to specific magical creatures with human appearance, magical powers, and a penchant for trickery. At other times, it's been used to describe any magical creatures such as goblins, gnomes. Fairy has at times been used as an adjective with a meaning equivalent to enchanted or magical. It's also used as the name for the place these beings come from, the land of fairy. A recurring motif of legends about fairies is the need to ward off fairies using protective charms. Common examples such as charms including church bells, wearing clothing inside out, four-leaf clovers, and food. Fairies were also sometimes thought to haunt specific locations and tend to lead travelers astray using will-o'-the-wisp. A will-o'-the-wisp, or igneous fatus, is an atmospheric ghost light seen by travelers at night, especially over bogs, swamps, or marshes. The phenomenon is known in English folklore, and much of the European folklore by a variety of names. Before the advent of modern medicine, fairies were often blamed for sickness, tuberculosis, and birth deformities. In addition to their folkloric origins, fairies were a common feature of Renaissance literature and Romantic art, and were especially popular in the United Kingdom. Etymology. The English fairy derives from the early modern English fairy, meaning realm of the fae. Fairy, in turn, derives from the Old French form, a derivation, the Vulgar Latin, the fata, or the fates, with the abstract noun airy. In Old French romance, a fae or a fée was a woman skilled in magic who knew the power and virtue of words, stones, and herbs. The term fairy is sometimes used to describe any magical creature, including goblins and gnomes, while at other times the term describes only a specific type of ethereal creature or sprite. Historical origins of fairies range from various traditions from Persian mythology to European folklore, such as of Brythonic, Gaelic, Germanic, Middle French. According to some historians, such as Bartholomew de Herbelot, fairies were adopted from and influenced by the Paris of Persian mythology. Paris were angelic beings that were mentioned in antiquity in pre-Islamic Persia as early as the Achaemenid Empire. Paris were later described in various Persian works in great detail, such as the Shahnameh by Ferdowsi. A Peri was illustrated to be fair, beautiful, and extravagant nature spirit that were supported by the wings. This may have influenced migratory Germanic and Eurasian settlers into Europe or been transmitted during early exchanges. In the Middle Ages, fairy was used adjectively, meaning enchanted, as in fairy knight or fairy queen, but also became a generic term for various enchanted creatures during the late Middle English period. Literature of the Elizabethan era conflated elves with the fairies of Romance culture in accordance with prevailing taste of the Victorian era, as in fairy tales for children. The Victorian era and Edwardian era saw a heightened and increased of interest in fairies. The Celtic revival cast fairies as part of Ireland's culture. Carol Silvers and others suggested this fascination of English antiquarians arose from a reaction to greater industrialization and a loss of older folk ways. A Christian tenet held that fairies were a class of demoted angels. One story described a group of angels revolting and God ordering the gates of heaven shut. Those still in heaven remained angels, those in hell became demons, and those caught in between became fairies. Others wrote that some angels, not being godly enough, yet not evil enough for hell, were thrown out of heaven. This concept may explain the tradition of paying a teind or a tithe to hell. As fallen angels, although not quite devils, they could be viewed as subjects of Satan. King James I, in his dissertation, Demonology, stated the term fairies referred to illusory spirits, demonic entities that prophesied to, consorted with, and transported the individuals they served in medieval times. A witch or sorcerer who had a pact with a familiar spirit might receive these services. In England's theosophist circles of the 19th century, a belief in the angelic nature of fairies was reported. Entities referred to as devas were said to guide many processes of nature, such as evolution of organisms, growth of plants, many of which resided inside the sun, solar angels. The more earthbound devas included nature spirits, elementals, and fairies, which were described as appearing in the form of colored flames, roughly the size of a human. Again, now we have fairies living inside of plants and trees, much like the Jinn. So, fallen angels, are they regular angels? You know what? Similar motifs are going on here, although they look much different. They're depicted as much more human-like and beautiful than the Jinn. At one time, it was thought that fairies were originally worshipped as deities such as nymphs and tree spirits, and with the burgeoning predominance of the Christian church, reverence for these deities carried on, but in a dwindling state of perceived power. Many deprecated deities of older folklore and myth were repurposed as fairies in Victorian fiction. Fairies as demons. A recorded Christian belief of the 17th century cast all fairies as demons. This perspective grew more popular with the rise of Puritanism among the Reformed Church of England. The hobgoblin, once a friendly household spirit, became classed as a wicked goblin. Dealing with fairies was considered a form of witchcraft and punished as such. And William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Oberon, king of the fairies, states that neither he nor his court fear the church bells, which the author and Christian apologist C.S. Lewis cast as a politic disassociation from fairies, although Lewis makes it clear that he himself does not consider fairies to be demons in his chapter on the topic. From the discarded image. In an era of intellectual and religious upheaval, some historians' reappraisals of mythology cast deities in general as metaphors for natural events, which was later refuted by other authors. This contentious environment of thought contributed to the modern meaning of fairies. Spirits of the dead. One belief held that the fairies were spirits of the dead. Derived from many factors common in various folklore and myths, same or similar tales of both ghosts and fairies, the Irish city origin of their term for fairies were ancient burial mounds, deemed dangerous to eat food in fairyland and Hades, the dead and fairies depicted as living underground. Diane Perkins observed an equating of fairies with the untimely dead who left unfinished lives. One tale recounted a man caught by the fairies who found that whenever he looked steadily at a fairy, it appeared as a dead neighbor of his. This theory was among the more common traditions related, although many informants also expressed doubts. There is an outdated theory that fairy folklore evolved from folk memories of a prehistoric race. Newcomers superseded a body of earlier human or humanoid peoples, and the memory of this defeated race developed into modern conceptions of fairies. Proponents find support in the tradition of cold iron as a charm against fairies, viewed as a cultural memory of invaders with iron weapons displacing peoples who had just stone, bone, wood, etc. at their disposal and were easily defeated. 19th century archaeologists uncovered underground rooms in the Orkney Islands that resembled the elfland described in Childe Roland, which lent additional support in folklore. Flint arrowheads from the Stone Age were attributed to the fairies as elf shot, while their green clothing and underground homes spoke to a need for camouflage and covert shelter from the hostile humans. Their magic, a necessary skill for combating those with superior weaponry. In a Victorian tenet of evolution, mythic cannibalism among ogres was attributed to memories of more savage races practicing alongside superior races of more refined sensibilities. A theory that fairies were intelligent species distinct from humans and angels. An alchemist, Paracelsus, classed gnomes and sylphs as elementals, meaning magical entities who personify a particular force of nature and exert powers over these forces. Changelings. A considerable amount of lore about fairies revolves around changelings, fairies left in the place of stolen humans. In particular, folklore describes how to prevent the fairies from stealing babies and substitute changelings, and abducting older people as well. The theme of the swapped child is common in medieval literature and reflects concern over infants thought to be afflicted with unexplained diseases. Disorders or developmental disabilities in pre-industrial Europe, a peasant family's subsistence frequently depended upon the productive labor of each member, and a person who was a permanent drain on the family's scarce resources could pose a threat to the survival of the entire family. Trying to think of a reason why a fairy or a Jinn would want to give away one of their young in replace of taking another. Maybe some kind of ritual or interbreeding between the two without it being known, or infiltrating families of different class. Or it's just a myth. But interesting to think about. These are fairy paintings from around the world. Fairy rings. They're often depicted with mushrooms, and mushrooms patches are called fairy rings. Could be a connection between psilocybin. Again, that's a psychedelic plant that is giving people connections to spiritual realms. So perhaps these characters reside within these or around them, or help in the cultivation of these things, and teach humans about taking in these plants to increase connection. Some beautiful images, fairies connected with butterflies. But that's about it. The rest I have is angels in ancient art. Here you have the angels piercing the Jinn or the demons, which are in the mouth of a beast with flames erupting from his mouth. Sounds like a dragon to me. These guys look just like the Jinn. They've got the wings, the horns, and all of the classic motifs we've seen. This is a cracked stone relief of an angel. And one thing to remember is that if these Jinn are fallen angels and they look a certain way, they look that way before they fell, in my opinion. I think that they would have looked the way they did before as they do now. So, and every story where someone sees an angel, they're terrified, and these are the good guys, right? So there's creatures on Earth that are just regular creatures that are terrifying to look at. So just looking at someone that looks like a Jinn, covered in hair with horns, doesn't mean that they're technically evil. They're a creation of the Creator, and potentially they're part of the fallen race, came down here and did horrific things, but there's beautiful humans that do horrific things every day, and ugly humans that do beautiful things. So it really makes me wonder what's going on with these characters and how to look at them in a new light without being afraid of what they could potentially be. And here's a great statue. You have the angel who is protecting a human, sword raised, looking down on some kind of reptile, winged, horned creature. Is this another depiction of the Jinn? Anyways, that is all I got. Let me know what you think.